Success.
Great.
Thank you, everyone, for
Nice.
your patience here and on Zoom. I'm going to shut. All right.
Okay, so I just shared my screen. So I believe I can start. Okay, so thank you, Brad, for the introduction and for this opportunity to present one of my recent research projects. I think I really like this room and this building. So, by the way, okay, so my name is Jong Kim. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Geography and Planning. Today, I'd like to talk about real estate tax burden and its implications for aging in place, especially from a geographic perspective and using the state of Pennsylvania as a case. Under this title, Preserving Home and Independence, the economic sustainability of Pennsylvania's real estate tax system for aging in place. So basically, this is a GIS, Geographic Information System database mapping and visualization project for public use and to provide public policy implications as well by trying to answer to questions like which areas within the state are challenging to age in place in terms of the relative property tax burden, and what are their characteristics. The project uses multiple indicators related to property tax, along with a group of demographic and economic variables in order to create an index of property tax burden against aging in place, which can identify counties and census tracts that are more or less challenging in that sense. The project outcomes include an online GIS dashboard and a web map that will go public later this year. So some important background. Now we all know that population aging is a reality. So 1 in every 6 people in the US were aged 65 and older in 2020. In the state of Pennsylvania, that's 1 in every 5 in 2022. Aging in place, by definition, is that people can stay in their homes as long as they want as they get older, instead of relocating to someplace else in their later life. And this has been the preferred choice for most older Americans, more than 75%, according to a recent SRPS survey. Meanwhile, housing and gerontology scholars, as well as like federal agencies such as NIH, they have emphasized the notion of aging in the right place. So because of, aging in place is not meant for everyone. So for instance, people with health or physical mental limitations may just be better off in other places, such as assisted living or nursing home facilities. On the other hand, there are people stuck in place despite their desires to move to a better place because of the limited financial circumstances. Another case is the people being even evicted, frequently due to gentrification and or property tax or mortgage payment default. So in order to properly age in place, one should reasonably be healthy, mentally, physically capable, feel comfortable with the residential environment, and most of all, financially prepared to afford expenses in their later life. So especially housing related, such as property tax, which is one of the biggest in their budget, in addition to those living and medical expenses. And housing value and the property tax typically increase over time, while their retirement savings may eventually dry up. So all these signify the importance of assessing real estate tax burden that can either support or hinder potential aging in place. So briefly, how are real estate taxes calculated in Pennsylvania? So the property tax payment can be estimated by one's market home value that is assessed by the county assessor or treasurer's office with a rate called a common level ratio, CLR, which is estimated and calculated by the State Tax Equalization Board for each county. So each county has different CRR every year. Then the assessed home value is the taxable amount that is multiplied by the property tax rate or mill rate, which is the sum of these three components. So county mill, municipal mill, and school district mill. All of them decided by their own administrative budget to cover its annual expenditure. So the tax payment can be calculated by multiplying these two. And here I define an effective tax rate as the rate calculated from the property tax payment divided by the market on home value. So these tax rates vary by municipality, even within the same county. And there is this geographic county and municipal level variations to the property tax rate, as the rate is basically determined by the amount of revenue that funds the operation of these local governments and school districts. So the real estate tax burden in this sense can be measured in several different ways. So obviously the first and second, the real estate tax rate and the amount of tax payment can be some of them. But the geographic variations in these, the tax rate and tax payment, are also relative and contextual to such as one's income level when we assess the true tax burden. So for instance, a property tax payment, higher property tax payment would not necessarily mean a higher property tax burden to those with a higher income level or lower cost of living and vice versa. Similarly, higher tax rate would not necessarily mean a bigger burden if home value were lower. So better measurements would be the ratio between the tax and income, or index that combines various factors into a single indicator, which can help us compare property tax burdens across different areas and the relative fairness and affordability of property tax, which could allow for more informed discussions. So here are the variables I use to create an index that factors in relevant contextual variables that can reflect the relative property tax burden against the aging in place. So once again, the burden or affordability is relative, so location dependent and individual unit or person specific. So there are a total of 13 variables that I used. So with this index, counties can be identified as challenging to age in place in terms of the real estate tax burden on older adults if they are above the 65th percentile in the state for these two indicators, median property tax amount and also median effective property tax rate, and are above the 90th percentile in the state for these variables: median home value, property tax ratio, annual cost of living for two adults, percentage of population age 65 and older, and are below the 10th percentile for median household income. Similarly, at the census tract level, they can also be identified as challenging to age in place if they are the same criteria, 65th percentile in the state for these variables. But at the census tract level, if they are above the 90th percentile with these variables, they are identified as challenging to age in place. So here are some map results. So first, this is the municipal level map, shows different nominal tax rates. So not the effective, but nominal tax rates throughout the state. And we can see some similar values clustered together, mostly within the county boundaries. The variations are greater by county and less prominent within each county, but there are still local variations if you look at it closely. So some counties and municipalities look scary, but you should not feel that way because this is the effective tax rate. So when we look at the effective tax rate, the variations between counties become less prominent, although we can see some large clusters of the highest effective property tax rates in the southeastern and eastern part of Pennsylvania. So the highest counties, Okay, so when we look at the real estate tax payment, not the rate, but the payment, the clustering around the large metros look more prominent. And the largest cities such as Philly and Pittsburgh, if you can see, these areas, especially inner city areas, show some of the lowest levels of median property tax payment. And we know that because the housing values in those inner city areas are pretty low on average. So it can also show a dramatic contrast to the surrounding suburban counties. If you look at specifically Philly and Pittsburgh area. So next one, when we factor in the income component. So when we factor in the income level and use the tax income ratio, the spatial concentration patterns slightly spread outward, but still showing the strengths in the east and around the Pittsburgh metropolitan area. And we can see the urban and rural division as well. That is quite visible and quite typical in the state of Pennsylvania. So you can see these urban areas, they tend to have a higher property taxing ratio, and those rural areas, rural counties, they have lower ratio values. When we look at the median effective tax rate by county, we can identify the highest tax rate counties such as Armstrong, in York County, Delaware as well, and the lowest rate counties in the rural areas at the center as well, and some counties surrounding the in the Pittsburgh metropolitan area as well. By the way, the Philly metro areas, these Chester County, Montgomery County, Bucks County, known for high housing values. In terms of the effective real estate tax rate, they are not the highest, except the Delaware County. But when we look at the median real estate tax payment by county, the Philadelphia metro area actually shows the highest level, top the chart. And other counties actually emerge, such as Center County, which is the home of the Penn State University and State College. So some eastern area counties and Center County, for example, they emerge if we look at from the real estate tax payment perspective. More precisely, when we factor in the income level and use the real estate tax income ratio as the measure, we can identify these counties as probably the most burdensome in terms of the property tax burden. So compared to the previous one, we have, so Lancaster County and Bucks County might not be that burdensome in terms of the tax income ratio, but we can see quite pretty similar groups of those counties that show the highest tax income ratio. So the southeastern counties and also some counties surrounding and nearby Pittsburgh area, northern or eastern part counties. So finally, this is the result of the index. So using this index, there are actually 15 counties that are identified as challenging to age in place. So Allegheny, again, Armstrong, Clarion, Cambria, Center, Cameron, Adams, York, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, Bucks, Lehigh, Pike counties. So actually, yes, 22% of the entire counties in the state of Pennsylvania. So there are 67 counties total. So these 15 counties are identified as challenging to age in place. But we should also acknowledge that there are local level variations at the smaller census tract levels. So if you look at those, each of these counties, there are community level, census tract level variations. So in terms of the census tract, about 25% of them are identified as challenging to age in place based on the index that I created. So let me move to the web map for a better visualization. Okay, so this is the web map. So if I turn off one of the layers, so some counties are considered these counties with red. So these are the 15 counties. So some counties are considered as challenging, but when it's examined at the more local census tract level, there are local communities that are not considered as challenging. So you can see the combination of these green and red areas within these, challenging counties. So Santa County, for example, also Cambria, Armstrong, Clarion, and Adams County. At the county level, they might be identified as challenging, but at the local level, they don't have a lot of census tracts that are considered as challenging. So this is the opposite picture. So on the other hand, many counties are not considered challenging, but when it's examined at more local census tract level, they have census tracts that are identified as challenging. So you can see this area, eastern part as well, as some census tracts close to the Allegheny County. So these are in Indiana, Berks, Schuylkill, Carbon, Monroe, Lackawanna counties. And finally, you can do a close examination by clicking the exact location in the dashboard. So you can look up their indicators, especially their percentiles, to understand how community-specific local conditions are like. So if I, using this indicator, if I type in any specific street address or municipality name, since I talked about Scranton, so I'll just type Scranton. So once you hit the Scranton in the search window and then click this location, this database can show the summary statistics and indicators and percentiles with regard to the county, municipality, and the specific census tract. So basically this one is showing, so the city of Scranton is in Lackawanna County. So is Lackawanna County, based on this index, challenging to age in place or not? So based on this index, no, at the county level. You can also check the median property tax amount, median assessed home value, median household income. You can compare these. Median home value as percentiles. Actually, property tax income burden is quite relatively high in Lackawanna County. So this is the percentile showing 80%. So pretty high in that aspect. Other indicators like median property tax in terms of percentile or rank within the state, 70 or 80 as effective property tax rate. So this database or dashboard can provide these different statistics and indicators related to the housing property tax, also some summary like median home value and so on. You can also go down to the smaller city level or municipal level, so Scranton City. So I need to update this database with effective tax rate, but basically this can show the tax rates and in terms of the rank. So the Scranton City is quite interesting because their nominal tax rate is very high. So actually it places the city in the top 9.8% in terms of the nominal property tax rate. And if you look at specifically those components of this nominal property tax rate, actually school district requires the most. So 147 is quite equivalent to 14.7% in terms of the property tax rate. County mills about 6%, municipal level about 5%. So combination of these three components make the place the Scranton as in terms of the nominal tax rate, in terms of the nominal tax rate, the highest tax rate, one of the highest tax rate cities, municipalities in the state. You can also go to the census tract level data. Also using the index, you can also check the answer. So at the census tract level, specifically the census tract may be considered as challenging to age in place. Although the city level it was not, but the specific census tract may be. So you can also find the specific indicators by going down this menu. You can also search like a specific county. So for example, if you're curious about Lackawanna County, you can type in and it will show you some summary statistics of Lackawanna County in terms of the population, percentage of population ages 65, close to 20%. Effective property tax rate in Lackawanna, 1.79%, and these values in terms of the percent actual. So going back to, to summarize the presentation, there are some policy considerations I could think of, and also there are project limitations of this project I could identify. So policy considerations, I know it's a lot, but this is the last slide. So property taxes are one of the highest costs in the older adults budget, according to many studies. And hypothetically, so this is a hypothetical situation, worst case scenario. So let's say, those who choose to age in place with an annual household income, not so much above $35,000, because the current property tax or rent rebate program for seniors in Pennsylvania, they apply this income limit. They have been applying this income limit of $35,000 before this year. Actually, with a recent proposal of expansion by the governor in this past question, they actually changed the income limit to 35 to 45, which is great. And also they increased the payment from $650 as the maximum to $1,000. There are also age limits, so 65 older or widows, those who are 50 plus years old, or those who have disabilities and 18 years and older. So they can qualify for this tax, property tax and rent rebate program. But this hypothetical situation, if an annual household income is not so much above 45,000, and in counties with a lower CRR, that means a higher assessed home value and a growing regional housing market, meaning an increasing market home value every year, as well as in a municipality with a higher budget demand, that means a higher local tax rate, and also a school district requiring a higher level of tax revenues. So once again, this is worst case scenario. So they have to assess whether aging in place is really a feasible option or not because of the property tax burden. So, but yeah, so there are probably those who narrowly miss these criteria for the property tax rebate program. As the tax burden is also always relative and contextual, so it really depends on the housing price and the income level and the cost of living and so on. So we may need to consider adopting more local specific and geographically targeted real estate tax assistance programs, such as local tax cap or freeze programs. I know the city of Philadelphia is using the freeze program, property tax freeze program, those who qualify in terms of the age and income. But we probably need to expand this type of programs to other areas. We can also support or supervise local governments to be held more accountable of managing their fiscal health and operating their budget more efficiently, so that they do not heavily over rely on the real estate tax revenue. Once again, the real estate property tax revenue is their biggest source of for the budget. Some project limitations. So almost always this and other index systems are relative. So we use percentiles and ranks within the system and limited to or based on intrastate comparisons. So we cannot really say the relative tax burden compared to other nearby states like New York, New Jersey, or Delaware. Real estate tax rates and market home values, they change frequently, annually for the tax rate and constantly market home value. So we don't know exactly what, it changes so frequently. So this project shows just a snapshot from year 2021 to 2022. And the analysis in this project is limited to the county and actually census tract level, but eventually the decision and ability to age in place will depend on individual level circumstances, financial health and those circumstances, and also personal choices, or with regard to all those relevant factors, like informal care or the closeness to their family members and so on. So this project does have these limitations. So thank you very much, and I would like to thank Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency who supported and funded this project, and also my department of Geography and Planning, the faculty who support this project, and also I'd like to thank my project team, especially from assistance from Mr. Zach Riley. So thank you very much, and here are the links to this dashboard and web map. So. Okay, so I'll be happy to receive any questions you may have and comments. Yes, thank you.
Perhaps you could stop sharing your screen.
Yeah.
That way, those on Zoom can see you better. Let's see. I know I have a question, but I can always jump in quickly. I want to defer and see if there are other questions.
I have a question about the 65 percentile as the cutoff.
Yes, yeah.
Might have been implicit in what you were saying, but you make it more explicit as to why it's there.
Okay.
Could you repeat the question? So
Yes.
people on Zoom will know.
Yes, I guess what word was question was that, what criteria or what justification or what motivation behind this using 65th percentile as equation? I think that's a great question. So yes, so basically I try to follow a model, index model, recently published by the White House committee, one of the White House committees. They created an index that can identify some disadvantaged census tracts or communities within the entire state in order to support with their funding. And they use this 65th percentile. So if I can show this, I can actually Google. So they actually use this 65th percentile and 90th percentile. So that was my question as well. What's your justification? Why do you use 65th, not 70s or 80s or 90s? So I think that's a great question, but I needed some criteria. But yeah, I think that's a great question. I may have to justify that, but this is more likely out of the convenience for this, to develop this index. So anyone can question that criteria. So maybe I can, make this dashboard or index system more flexible so that people can actually adjust that, percentile based on their preference. So if they want to reflect on only those like property tax burden, like using 50% or like 30%, so that people can have their, freedom to work with this index. But basically can be, yes, yeah, I cannot find any strong justification. I don't want to say arbitrary numbers, but yeah, basically. So if I can show you, this is White House.
Why don't you share your screen again so that folks on Zoom can see?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes.
I jumped the gun and asked you.
Yes. So yeah. This is Justice 40 initiative from the White House Environmental Justice. So Department of Energy. If I can find the information. Screening tool. Yeah, so basically I follow the model development of climate and economic justice screening tool from the Department of Energy work, actually from the White House Council methodology and data. So they do have these categories of burdens. So climate change, energy, health, housing, and so on. So for housing category, so communities are identified as disadvantaged if they are in census tracts that experience this historical investment or are at or above the 90th percentile for housing costs or lack of green space or lack of employment or lead paint. So they use 90th percentile for these specific categorical burdens. But yeah, that find this, but they use the 65th percentile as first the kind of the first filter to identify those disadvantages. So federal governments and agencies, they use these criteria to identify these disadvantaged communities. So I felt like I could use these same numbers, but it can be debated. I think this is great.
I believe Professor Wenko had a question on Zoom.
Okay.
Thank you for this presentation. I did arrive late, however, so
Perhaps on your laptop, and there's one here also.
Okay, so yeah, we're sorry. Could you please repeat your question? We didn't turn on our volume.
now I'm muted. All right, that was on my end. That was my fault. Wait, it keeps telling me that I'm muted, but I'm not. Can you hear me? I'm going to sing until you hear me, and that'll be sad.
We're having some trouble, Cheryl, but we found you now. Go ahead.
Okay. Because I did just threaten to sing until you could hear me.
Yes.
Carol, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I can. Is it good to go?
Yeah, well, we're having some trouble, but go ahead.
Okay. Usually I could be very loud, but right now my voice is kind of suffering, so I can't. And I apologize. I arrived late, so I didn't hear an explanation of the framing of the scope of your project. So this might take you out of what you're actually looking at, but it comes from personal experience of looking into my options, as I approach, 30 some years here. And so one of the things that I look at when I think of aging in place is also the cost of living, right? But also the cost of care, right? In my area, should I choose to go somewhere else? So I don't know if that was part of your analysis, like comparing, right, the cost of aging in place to the cost of like the options and geographical area. But I was just interested if that had crossed your mind to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment and also question. So I think that assumption is implicit in my research. So as you can see from my slide, I basically, this is overly simplistic, but I just listed, housing, basic living expenses, and also, medical expenses. We cannot, especially if we are, when we are younger, we cannot easily estimate, how those medical expenses will just come up in our later life. So I think in that sense, we need to be really prepared and careful when we plan for our aging place and retirement, because those medical expenses could be really unexpected and huge. So that's why I implicitly assume medical expenses is a big part of this. When we talk about expenses in later life, and so what I want to say would be like we want to save as much as possible in other expenses. So mainly housing expenses and also property tax, obviously. So I think that's, yeah, I think I consider that implicitly, but medical expenses can always be a huge factor. So yeah, I think it really depends on individual circumstances as well. So it's really hard to predict, but maybe, I don't know, maybe we can try to identify some average medical expenses by different, location or geography. But yeah, I think it's as we mentioned, it's quite out of the scope of this project. But it's a useful, very insightful point that I can further look into. So yeah. Thank you for your comment and question as well.
Cheryl got it. I think Professor Wanko's question was similar to mine because I wondered about what other key indicators impact the ability to age in place. And you just mentioned some of them. Cheryl's question also mentioned some of them.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if there are any impacts of a higher level of challenge to aging in place that we can see correlations with your data set. So, for example, are foreclosures or some measure of involuntary sale of houses, do you have access to data like that? Can you see a correlation between your analysis of where it's more challenging to age in place in terms of property taxes and these other indicators?
Yes, I think those are great indicators to look at. Although I didn't look at those indicators, but I assume, yeah, there should be some correlation, positive correlation between the foreclosure rate or property tax default and other indicators. So yeah, I can definitely look into those variables. And I've also looked at the reverse mortgage because it's different. It's kind of to prevent the situation of property tax default or foreclosure. So the federal government actually provides reverse mortgage program, but I can also look at that aspect as well. So if there are areas with higher rates of foreclosure, property tax default, or like this reverse mortgage use, we can probably say they could probably be challenging, and there might be some correlations with them for this population to age in place. So yeah, I think that's a great point that I can use in my future to update this, upgrade this research. So yeah.
Could you say more about reverse mortgage programs?
Yeah.
I'm not sure everyone will know what that is, and to be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on the concept and how it works.
So basically, really, if I say really simplistically, basically, your home equity will just decrease. So let's say your market home value will decrease as time goes by because you're basically paying the property tax and possibly the mortgage payment out of your home equity. So while your home value is lower, getting lower, you pay for those property tax and those expenses from that home. I know this is overly simplistic, but basically the federal government do operate this program. I cannot come up with its name right off the bat, but people can use that. And usually the private sector reverse mortgage programs are more costly and expensive, but the federal government reverse mortgage program is much more affordable. So that can also be an option. So if people want to, but there is a caveat that, at the end, if they want to, sell their house and try to have some, equity out of their previous home, they would get just a smaller amount because they are paying out of their home equity, home value. So.
I have more questions,
Yeah.
but I don't want to. I don't see any hands on Zoom, so I'll ask my next question. How does a more challenging to age in place circumstance impact renters? Because property taxes don't show up directly, but they do show up indirectly in terms of the levels of rent. Are there programs to assist people trying to age in place who are renters but not property?
Yeah, I think that's a great question as well. So the current property tax rent rebate program. So basically, this state level program support rent rebate as well if they can qualify these criteria. And I totally agree. Sometimes those property taxes are kind of embedded in their rent expense. Sometimes not, but I think they can utilize this program and this project. I think Brad mentioned correctly. This project is actually solely focused on the property owners, so not renters. But I want to mention that this program can cover both owners and renters as well. So it might be another separate project if I can really dig into the challenges for those renters in terms of aging place. So you should have different dynamics, but yeah, I think that there'll be another great project. So yeah. Yes, Walt.
So do you have data or anecdotal evidence on those areas where it's more difficult to age in place? That those who do acquire a lot of equity in their house over the years, then use that to buy into a retirement community with graduated care, for example.
Yeah, I think that's a great point as well. So that will lead to probably my next case studies if I really want to look at those specific communities or cities. But I could possibly pick those. Obviously, those counties, the Philly, within the Philly metro area, expensive because our housing values are on average much more expensive than other areas. But interestingly, I think Bucks County could be one of them because they have quite high property tax burden, but their income level is also pretty high. So the overall the burden is not that high compared to other nearby surrounding Philly metro counties. So I think Bucks County could make an interesting case study. Maybe Lackawanna County, but maybe Scranton, city of Scranton, and also Pittsburgh area. So yeah, I think that would be a really useful approach if I want to look into more specific conditions and how these dynamics work in those counties or communities. I mean, does that?
Yeah, I think it's just like an open question. I think that is an option that some people have anyway, but I was wondering, further data collection would be interesting to know just how those options are available as an alternative to aging in place in different areas.
Yes, I think that's a great point as well. So recently I talked to the Center for Rural Pennsylvania and the policy analyst Jonathan, and he introduced me the kind of the survey work, survey of different types of housing for aging in place. So like such as naturally occurring retirement communities or like other co-op type of housing that public may not know very well, but they are available, they exist. So in that sense, I think I can probably compare those types to our like typical single family, housing units in some specific counties. So there are options that can be looked into. So, but I didn't cover those various areas. So I know this is quite simplistic, but yeah, I just try to look at the overall picture of the entire state. So.
Well, we are a little past 12:50, so I want to pause here for anyone online or here in person who needs to head to another class or appointment. But before we go, please join me in thanking Professor Jongwoong for this presentation. All right. Okay. I'm going to end the